I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference for staff and for patients. The NHS is the biggest employer in the country. They are your patients. If our own staff are telling us it's not a nice place to work, what do you think patients are going to say? If you can influence and make a change to staff and people that work for you, then they are absolutely going to change the fortunes and the experience of patients.
Hello and welcome to The Connection, where RLDatix's Chief Customer Officer Liz Jones and Medical Director Darren Kilroy are joined by leaders and colleagues from within the healthcare industry. In The Connection, we explore how people and technology in healthcare can come together to create great experiences and support patient safety. We hope you enjoy listening.
Hello and welcome to the Connection podcast. My name is Liz Jones.
And my name's Darren Kilroy.
And today we are really delighted to be joined with Nicci Briggs, who is going to talk to us a little bit about her background, her career, her life in NHS finance, both within hospital settings, but also now within NHS England. So welcome, Nicci.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Nicci, this podcast is all around the real you.
Well, that's one thing I can talk about without any slides, hopefully.
That's right, there are no slides.
There are no slides.
No prep needed.
No prep needed. So, Nicci, as Liz said, tell us how you came to do what you do now. What's your story?
So I always tell people it's funnier to do it in reverse. I think I'm nearly 10 years as a CFO now. About 15 years in the NHS. Before that, I did a tour of local government, so public sector. So I did local government, the police.
Come back to that,
started in the private sector and now wishing, why didn't I just stay there?
Yeah.
And then I would say lifeguard, chicken factory. So it depends where you want to go.
Definitely chicken factory.
Chicken factory, yeah.
Roles that I've managed to do.
We've got the chicken factory in common. Just so you know.
Yeah.
So, I think lifeguard, maybe I tried my hand at the healthcare part of it and then realised I'd be better at finance.
Our middle daughter's a lifeguard. So, were you a lifeguard? You're not still doing it now, are you? No. But
that was job free school. So from
Nice
like
one.
16,
Yeah.
it's a good job to have.
Totally.
It used to pay more than working in a shop
Absolutely.
or bar or anything like that.
Well, imagine it was like pretty, it still must be, Darren, for your kids, but it's pretty cool job, isn't it? Like,
cool job.
It's like,
Until your friends from school come and kind of play up and act up and
all of that.
Yeah.
But
So,
no heavy petting and all of those rules that used to be on the side of the wall.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it stands you in good stead through life, doesn't it, professionally?
But in all seriousness, actually, that's interesting because doing something like that at a young age, you've got a level of responsibility versus me, who was just stacking knickers in M&S, right? At school. But, so there's a bit of responsibility there at the get-go and some sort of leadership. So when you go on, take us back then, or do you want to start at the beginning or the end?
I start at the beginning. Yeah. So I literally just did it because it paid the most money.
Yeah.
And I love swimming, so I was a really good swimmer.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, do you keep going down the swimming route, or do they used to do life saving as a competition. So competitive life saving.
Yeah.
No one actually drowned, it was like dummies and everything like that. So from that they said, well, why don't you just, get a job when you're 16.
Yeah.
Get a job with us. So I used to do that in and around school. So GCSE, A levels.
Yeah.
And then when I was at uni, I used to come back and just be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
In between. So
nothing's changed. My daughter still does that now. She's at university now and comes back and does that in holiday.
Yeah.
So
and the other one, there was then the chicken factory in holidays as well, because you're just kind of maxing out. I didn't work when I was at uni. I kind of maxed out doing 2 jobs in between.
Yeah.
We're going to keep this brief because it's going to be very weird for the listeners. But what did you do in the chicken factory? Because I did a chicken factory when I was.
So this will make them. I got moved off
chicken run right away.
But it's really hard.
Yeah,
work,
so I got
right?
moved off the production line because the productivity went down when I joined. Because there's a load of largely old ladies. Who I just got chatting to and distracted them, so I wasn't packing quick enough.
Yeah.
So basically my job consisted of every 20 minutes doing 3 different things. One was, as the chickens go over your head, pulling the legs from the chicken. So, and then as the kind of legless chickens then come round on the conveyor belt, my other job was then putting them onto a spike with just plastic gloves. So, you kind of not much health and safety.
No.
And then the third lot of the kind of rotation was literally physically ripping the breasts off the carcass. So that was it. So you'd see me, if I'd miss a leg, I'd be running halfway down the
Yeah, to get
Yeah.
to get the
so that was
thing,
your
but
first foray into
that was my first
productivity.
foray, and I
Productivity.
realised
Yeah,
that
that's it.
if I could use my brain and do a better job, that
Yeah.
was absolutely, you know, 'cause,
Yeah.
there are some people that's all that they're able to do at this day, and fair play to them because it's a really tough
Hard
job.
Yeah.
work. I agree.
Relentless,
But
yeah.
also the embarrassment of my mum refused to let me come in the house with like
Yeah.
smelling of chicken, so I
Yeah.
had to get
Yeah.
undressed in the porch. So a bit
Yeah.
like COVID times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
to COVID, and my wife did the same and said, "Stay
Yeah.
outside."
Absolutely.
And so you ditch
Absolutely.
your clothes
You're gonna
there
have
because I
done
was
this
working at
before.
hospital at the
I
time.
know
I'm
how
like,
this works.
oh my god, I've got flashbacks to
Has
the
it
chicken
given
factory.
you a lifelong hatred of chicken dishes, or are you still
No,
a
actually, to
chicken
be
fan?
fair, it made me realise how clean it is.
Right.
So I have a lot more
Cold and
Yeah.
freezing
freezing
cold.
cold.
Yeah.
yeah. But I actually think having those experiences, we don't talk about it enough. Actually, having those experiences, it stays with you and it gives you an appreciation for all of the work that people do in the different jobs.
Yeah,
which is a lot about what we're on.
Absolutely.
This podcast
Yeah, I mean,
for.
my parents couldn't afford. I'm a granddaughter of two mining families, so they worked down the pits. The only thing they ever said to us was, "Get a good education,
Yeah.
so you don't have to do the same."
Yeah.
And where was that geographically? Where are you, Nicci, at this stage? Where are the mining farm? Where was
So
the
they
mining
were
farms?
all South Yorkshire, so
Right.
Yeah.
Rotherham,
Yeah.
so big pit
Yeah.
countries, and from a little place called Ramarsh, which is famous
Yeah.
because Jamie Oliver tried to get them to eat healthy.
That's
and,
right, took you to
failed,
Oslo.
I think. Of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the whole community has just collapsed once the pits went.
Yeah.
So
I remember
mine-
that because I used to work clinically at Rotherham Hospital in A&E there, and it's absolutely true that when you see how because quite a few male nurses at Rotherham in the A&E department used to be miners,
Yeah.
and they'd retrained as nurses, and it's fascinating to see how it had changed literally the whole dynamic of the town.
Yeah.
So my parents, just before they had me, moved to Lincoln purely for raising kids.
Yeah.
Where there are people that have got different opportunities,
Yeah.
different jobs, and
Yeah.
to try and break the cycle kind of thing. Which
Yeah.
so lifeguard and chicken factory was in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
So
Did you find, and you might not be able to remember, in the chicken factory days, were the owners of the chicken factory pumping more and more money into chicken factory production, but productivity not rising? Yeah.
Now, what I did realise actually is that it's the same chicken
Yeah.
that is sold in Iceland that is sold in Marks and Spencer's, but
There
they
you
just
go.
rip the middle bit out and sell it separately as a goujon.
Oh,
So
that's still right now.
yeah, I'd imagine it's still
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
That's the goujon.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's
Just
The goujon.
the middle
Yeah,
bit
this-
that you get
Yeah.
for free if you buy your chicken
Yeah.
They
from
named
from
French and knew that
Tesco
that
or
would
somewhere
definitely
else.
make it more
but
expensive.
Marks and Spencer's sell it
This podcast
separately.
is more for what's inside the factory.
Amazing.
Getting onto
amazing.
finance.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to uni. What did you go and do business?
No, I
or-
did maths.
Did
So,
you?
Yeah.
Oh my
Right.
god, lovely.
So loved and did pure and applied. So,
So you could have
hated
gone
statistics.
anywhere with
yeah.
that, actually. Yeah.
So dropped statistics early. I really didn't. My lies more lies than statistics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen me at some of the productivity
Yeah.
stuff. It's all stats now.
For
but,
sure.
did pure and applied, and then did my I majored in cryptography. So
Wow.
coding and
Unbelievable.
game
You
theory,
really
all
could
of
have gone
that
in
stuff.
all
So
sorts of
yeah,
directions.
I was telling the story to a couple of friends of I really wanted to be like GCHQ. So
Yeah,
do
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
coding and I say, a failed spy maybe of.
Hey, for all we know, you are.
Yeah,
Well, you're
exactly.
there now.
That's a good job. Isn't
That's a
it? An
good job,
accountant
yeah.
for the
We'd
NHS
we'd
is
never
actually
know.
how I've disguised it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the plan. Just kind of, but I loved the thought, and I think this is what's then helped me in my career. Is I always say to people, and particularly in this job, because we jump straight to a solution. The NHS is fantastic, jumping straight to a solution rather than defining the problem. And I think maths is all about just the only way you prove something is true is by proving that something else isn't.
Yeah.
Effectively. So I think my inquisitive nature and trying to define the problem has then actually helped me in pretty much nearly all of the roles that I've done. But the reason I ended up in finance was I had a placement year, so I did a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
With the 3rd year on a placement, because I was my birthday's in July, so I was like, I'm gonna be leaving university with similar degrees to other people. What is it that makes me stand out? Part made me stand out because I was a woman in maths.
Yeah.
So a bit like women in finance,
Yeah,
senior
yeah.
finance anyway. Kind of had a lot of, you're one of very few people. So considered engineering and I went to work for Vauxhall. So up at Ellesmere Port. So up in the northwest. Loved it there, but I happened to be there when there was a turnaround team in.
Right.
So they were about to close Ellesmere Port and they brought a turnaround team in who I went on a finance trainee scheme And they got rid of my boss and said, well, you're an undergrad, so you can't do any worse than them, just do it. So we had a big turnaround project. And the thing that I remember from them that was brilliant was one of the most expensive things was scrap metal. So our scrap was really poor. And they just brought a plant in because of part of GM. One of the best ones was somewhere in Poland, and they brought that guy over and said, right, you do it here.
Yeah.
And that learning that we've still not quite got right in the NHS. Was right, I'm going to put you where you've done it well, come here. So I ended up being exposed and getting quite a senior kind of finance job.
Yeah.
Going back to university, and they said that Vauxhall offered me a job, but I was just really worried that I wouldn't get the qualifications.
Yeah.
So I loved finance because I got to go and talk to the people on the shop floor who were they were like, well, you talk in a way that I understand, whereas all finance people don't.
Yeah.
So one of the things I found out immediately was all of the comms kind of wasn't landing anywhere, and we were asking people about change of shifts and things like that, and silly things like appraisals and timesheets and stuff. And I went over to the shop floor and said, why is this not being done? And they're like, where have you told us this? And they're like, on an email and a notice board. Well, they're on the factory, A, they don't log onto the computer.
Yeah.
But B, on the notice board, what we found out was almost 40% of staff couldn't read. So the kind of headquarters were putting things out.
Yeah.
Well, if people can't read, they're not going to know. So I went back to the kind of trust board and said, I think you need to just get people to go and talk at team meetings if you want something to happen.
Yeah.
So that kind of just gave me actually finance can make a difference. Finance staff can make a difference, but only if we talk a language that people understand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that's made me probably stand out more than any, that I simplify finance, but also I'm happy to go and talk to people.
Yeah, sure.
People that are doing the role, the people that are doing those jobs, because we're just an enabling function. We're not. So then I just got a graduate scheme job, and I had the choice between transport for London, so coming here, or Cambridge County Council.
Yeah.
And I took my dad, who's Yorkshireman, to Cambridge for when I was deciding, and we went to the pub and bought a pint, and he asked if there was a pie with it because it was so expensive compared to me. And he was like, I think it was like £4 back then. And it was just like, what do I get? Do I get food with that? So, I really liked the Cambridge scheme because you got to do every bit of finance. So you had to you did 6 months in audit, which I hated. You did 6 months in kind of systems, then you did planning, then you did kind of management accounts. So you got to pick everything. I kind of didn't know which bit of finance that I wanted to do. So that's how I randomly ended up from a maths degree in finance. So,
and what has been the difference between you've talked a little bit about actually some of the things that you can take from the private sector through into your role that you've had in the NHS, or roles you've had in the NHS. What about from other parts of the public sector, like councils? How similar do you think it really is? Or
so it's I think it's really interesting. I think the police was the biggest eye opener. So I spent in there doing some work with them. I did a big shared service project. They are so hierarchical, really hierarchical. But there are some things that they are brilliant at, and we could absolutely learn from, particularly around use of bank overtime and things like that. So one of the things, the police have the same issues as us in that there are certain times where they are busier and it's not rostered in. So for them, funny enough, most crime happens on a full moon. Really random, but does happen. So you see spikes, like data-wise, big spikes. And
I think that's because it's quite light at night.
Well,
because
there's links to mental health and a whole load of other stuff.
I was going to say it's because certain people like grow plants by the moon, don't they?
Sure.
So there's a whole load of
So obviously the other ones are things like Halloween,
and
then bank holidays, those kind of things, Christmas, New Year.
Yeah.
But rather than doing kind of what we do, which is leave it to every individual ward and everyone else to kind of have so much agency and what do we call it, headroom and all of that stuff, what they did was say, actually, agency and that isn't a bad thing, and bank isn't a bad thing, but they did it for a whole year. So they knew, funny enough, like the NHS, we know when Christmas is going to be. It always surprises me when I talk to budget holders and they've let loads of people have annual leave and then there's loads of agency bill. I'm like, this, it is the 25th of December every year, Christmas. We know when it is. So, but what they did was then kept a big pot of money at a kind of divisional level, the flex, and just, but what they offered that flex to their staff for double rates. So they kind of broke their own pay scales for those
basically plan that in.
Specific dates, but they offer them in the January, the year before the April to March starts. So people can plan their leave, they can plan those days, And they just didn't see it as a bad thing, and it ended up cutting their kind of agency and bank costs actually by a lot, because
there's some
they managed
healthcare
it in a different way.
organisations that do that in the US. Do you think? Because I know, because there's more fixed patterns, aren't there, in the police as well, I think. What's your take on, you've just given a great example there of how from one sector to another, you can see things that you go, actually, you could borrow that or do this. I think earlier on you said, we're not always brilliant at doing that in health and care. Why do you think that is? Is it culture, or what's your take on it? Is it just too big to change?
It's really interesting, because I don't think it's so the one thing I don't think it is people, because I genuinely think that 99% of people come into work to do a good job, and you're in healthcare. Like even when you look at jobs, finance, and other careers, people have chosen healthcare.
Absolutely.
Let's face it, you could have a much easier life and probably a lot more money if you went and worked in the private sector for a consulting firm or whoever. So I do think people have come in to do a good job. I think that part of it is there is something about sharing that when we haven't got to grips with, and I don't know whether it's people feel, I don't know whether it's that kind of regulatory culture that people feel as soon as I put my hand up and say I don't know, or does anyone have an idea? We kind of get into the
problem,
people,
like you say, actually.
Part of it isn't defining the problem, so everyone thinks theirs is slightly different when actually the root of it is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I remember as well through the COVID, through the pandemic, talking about culture and engagement and conversations, how people feel, and I've always had a peculiar interest in sort of the financial elements of clinical life, and how you can weave that conversation into the clinical mindset. And historically, I think, for clinicians, there's been this reticence to engage them in financial conversations, because you worry that there's this perception, which is wrong, that clinical staff will recklessly spend money, they'll swallow up resources, they won't do anything with it. And through the pandemic, I saw that when you actually engage people more directly in that, and the clinical staff had to be implicated more in resources, kit, masks, FFP, all that stuff. If you break down all those silos, it makes it much more rewarding. And I think historically in the NHS, you're talking about the difference with the police and what we can learn from that. There has been a standoff for years, I think, and I was a clinician for many years, in involving all the staff in conversations around finance, because as you say, they've come into ostensibly what they used to awfully call back office jobs in the NHS, which I don't even think that's a thing. Everyone, by definition of being involved in working in the healthcare system, wants to do something better for patients. I firmly believe that. You want to make a difference in some way. It might not be immediately apparent what the difference is, but you are doing something. And the more we can weave, and the pandemic, I think, was a great example. I don't know what you found in the pandemic, Nicci, and what you were doing then. When you get rid of lots of layers of bureaucracy, ostensibly because you haven't got time to worry about it, people are much more, people want to be involved in it.
Yeah, so I think there's probably two things I'd say. That one, I always say to finance people, clinicians are your best friend. They're lying to you if they say they don't do finance, because they absolutely get it. And most of them work privately, so they completely get it. They know how to code. They know all of those really, really good things that you need to talk to them about. And also, they're competitive in nature. So if you have a conversation about productivity and tell them that their reg is doing more procedures than they are, they're, funnily enough, soon start to take much more notice about it. But there's two. One thing I did prior to COVID, so I was working in a hospital at the time, an acute hospital. We had the same thing. We'd had a really bad CQC. There'd been a churn at board level. And I was kind of new in post, my first CFO role. And came up with the idea of Dragon's Den as a way of just getting the organisation engaged in, because I did, before as the CFO, asked to step into the CFO role, I was the director of transformation, because I thought I need to get a board role, cut my teeth, but do it in something that isn't quite got the responsibility, and the fact that I might, there's always the CFO if you end up in prison. That's in the back of your head when you shut the door and go. So the transformation was like, actually, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is as well, and do a bit of doing. And I think it was brilliant. Rather than just doing a bigger deputy role, I kind of went and did that role. And I said to the team, I've got an idea, and I think that if I can get the organisation to do it, we'll get a lot of people engaged in transformation, rather than thinking productivity is a bad word or SIP. It doesn't matter what we call it, cost improvement, productivity. It eventually becomes like a something that people hate because they get beaten around the head about it. But rather than it being as an opportunity to do better. I managed to convince the board to let me have £100,000. It was capital at the time, to run a Dragon's Den event. And we were going to run it in person. So we we're going to get people in a hall. Got a load of local celebrities and stuff. So he'd got kind of the local Capital FM radio DJ and other people like that. Big organisation. So Churches Shoes is a big factory in Kettering. So they offered to come. So they knew nothing about healthcare. And we got people to pitch. And I don't like, I call them the PMO police who love to write project plans in pages of stuff. I asked for people to send it via text messages, videos, Facebook, or just do something like that makes, sells their idea. And we didn't do any coaching with any of them. We got an event set up. There was like 200 staff invited. They all came. We ended up with 10 ideas and they pitched them as if they were Dragon's Den. And the only thing we said to them was, don't do a slide presentation. Please, God, don't turn up the PowerPoint. We had some brilliant ones. So we had ones dressed as bees. So the busy bee was one of the ones which is a brilliant device which looks like a bee and it goes on your hand. And it's so a lot of cannulas that go into children is really anxious for them. It's not nice. A lot of the time they don't get the level of gel right, etc. And this has got a freezing block in it, but it's got vibrations which stops the pain. So, but a nurse from A&E had this idea, but just couldn't get anyone to listen to her.
Wow.
So then they rolled it out across the whole of the children's wards, ITU, and then in A&E as well. And actually said quite a few adults, so people with autism or any kind of neurodiversity. The one that actually won the most was she was a porter, and she wanted to basically put effectively a golf buggy, and she'd managed to go to a company to let them lend her a golf buggy for the night to take patient transport to cardiology into all the wards from the car park. So there was about 5 or 6 that won the awards. Not only that, people like Churches then donated money, but the buzz that it created across the organisation, people realising, actually, if I put my hand up, and the one thing we did, and I said to my team at the time, we cannot PMO backside out of this.
Because
we need to get those people. We need to get those people to then manage their project. So we sit with them, let them see it, because there's something really good about someone saying, "I'm taking." Gets rid of that apathy. I think part of our problem across the NHS and most large organisations is that apathy of, I've asked, I've tried, they've said no, I won't bother the next time. So we got her to run it. She is now a trained nurse because she realised that when people believe in her and the skills that she got.
So it changed her life as well.
Absolutely changed their life on the back of this. And then we ran it for a second year there. And then when I went to Leicester, we did a thing called Project Launch, where they stupidly gave me £1 million and said, what could you do? And I had a guy come up to me on that one who was a cancer sufferer, and he burst into tears, and his wife came up and gave me a big hug and went, you saved his life. He was so depressed, so down, because he'd got a manual job, couldn't go back to it after having really bad spinal cancer, joined a dragon boat racing club, kind of complete different lease of life, all cancer sufferers. So that's not really health, but it absolutely changed, people's lives and things like that. So that was another thing that, people that are in Leicester will remember that. We have done one of the best ones as well, is just like stories that stick with you. They're not finance, none of these are finance stories, but really one was fantastic. A dementia garden. So there was inside the kind of adult medicine wards, which were largely the dementia wards, which used to be funny. I used to volunteer, and as a CFO, I used to spend a lot of time going out. I largely used to go, you probably can't say it now, and largely go to where people used to smoke, because they take my badge off and people would tell you anything. Go around there and tell you what's going on with your organisation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But one of the ones was, so one of the Dragon's Den initiatives, there was a dementia garden. There was a lot of kind of 1940s hospital. Kettering had a hole in the middle of the wards. 3 wards, and then all your lift areas. And one of the ward sisters had the idea to create a dementia garden. So have a little cafe using like an old shed. And they got a local artist draw murals, so it looked like a beach. So it looked like a seaside. And a woman came to the opening and said her dad, she'd been visiting in hospital, got dementia, had not recognised her for over a year, and recognised her because he remembered taking her to go on the donkeys.
This is so brilliant.
So that kind of it's that you can enable. I mean, those are they're kind of token things.
Yeah.
But
it's
I
a
think that's what's the
mindset.
start in life of that's the bit that you realise you can absolutely enable, but you do it through people that really want to go. And there are so many, it goes back to the long-winded way of answering your point of there are so many people that want to make a difference.
Absolutely.
We're not harnessing it in the right way, because what we do at the NHS is bore the life out of things by putting a load of process. I'll get killed for this back of the ranch, but putting a load of process. I understand what you're saying. Around it, rather than trusting people that know their job, know their patients, know their area, and working with them. Be that clinicians, it doesn't need to be clinicians.
No, absolutely.
It can be, a ward sister. It can be a porter. It can be someone that's walked the same way. And you go and talk. You've got to find a way to get them to take ownership and enable them to do that job, and then wrap people around them. Rather than, I think, feel like what we often do, and organisations do it, and then at a greater scale, so do NHS England and everyone else, is we create a whole load of generic people who take a problem and go, well, let's do a project management type approach to it, rather than saying, well, let's just engage. But, we talk about how patients feel. Well, go and talk to them. At the ICB, I talk to all the patient groups. I mean, some of them you don't, particularly if I was responsible for primary care and talking to GP. It was much easier to talk to patients than it was to GPs sometimes. But, that's you go to a GP surgery. I went to a pharmacy and realised that the same place that they store their drugs, they'd got a tiny little place for coffee, and they were also storing them in toilets and everything else. So there wasn't anywhere for anyone in a community pharmacy to sit and have 2 seconds. You just think all of those things that we all take for granted, and they're paid minimum wage. They're not on agenda for change.
Absolutely.
They're things like blue light card they don't get.
No, that's right.
So then we wonder why community pharmacies are closed.
That's right.
Not the patients see them as the NHS, and the NHS
do,
hasn't quite wrapped their arms around.
But what you've described there is leadership. Like, as I'm listening to, I'm going, what you're describing is the ability to lead people. So you're not, whether or not you're in finance or in a clinical role or in a HR role, that those principles apply. So what? It's a bit of a personal question, this, right? You can edit it out if you don't want to answer it. But what do you think it is within you that means that you've got the we talked about risk appetite, didn't we, earlier? That either the impetus or your risk appetite is. So what is it in you that means that you see the world that way and feel confident to do it? And what would you advise others that are maybe thinking, I'd love to do what Nicci's doing, but I don't know how to do it?
So I think it's probably 3 things, if I'm honest. One is I'm a beg for forgiveness kind of person.
Nice.
So in Leicester, LLR, ICB, they'd been toying for a while, the GPs saying inner city practices were underfunded, blah, blah. It was halfway through COVID, I'd moved to that role, and the chief exec said, Nick, is there anything in this? We kind of realised there was. Cahill formula actually was perpetuating a whole load of health inequalities, doesn't reward areas of deprivation and things like that. And so he said, well, let's just come up with a new formula. Let's come up with a new funding formula. Let's pay GPs differently. And it was only afterwards. So we started that conversation in October, implemented it in July. So didn't take years of consultation. Did it as a no losers approach. So everyone had to say yes. Managed to get all the GPs to sign off on it. All the GP practices, 130 or so of them. And it was only when someone said afterwards, I presented it to NHS England, and they said, who did you get permission off? And what about the solicitors? And I was like, well, I was a little bit smart in the fact that I didn't change the GP contract. What we did is added a local element on. Right. So I knew that from a legal perspective, I was okay. But I was like, well, no one stopped me, and I didn't feel like I needed to ask anyone's permission.
And the GPs are behind it.
And the GPs had said, there's that groundswell, goes back to the Dragon's Den. So there's a beg for forgiveness.
And you'd understood the problem, so you knew your solution.
I'd understood the problem, so how I understood the problem was I got a load of GPs in a room.
Sure.
So the first thing I did was, rather than say, we got a whole load of data people, got population health folk, and got GPs, and 3 more in a room. And people say, oh, well, Nicci did this. I didn't do that much. What I did was brought people together. Brought a whole load of people and kind of defined the problem and then said, okay, well, let's work out how we can do that as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of them is that. The second one is I don't need any praise. So I'm really excited when people deliver. And if I can give them a route to deliver. So I'm happy for any, and I think that works in an ICB because I'm happy to create win-win situations where the hospital can go back and say, I beat the ICB and I got this out of them. And that's what I said so many conversations with CFOs saying, listen, I think you can sell this to your board as this. But in the background, I'm going, well, I've sort of won anyway, but we'll let you pitch it as you went in and you were really stern. And I just don't care who wins in that place. I care about the patient and I care about the output. How we get there, I don't need any personal credit for, and I don't need even the organisation kind of credit. Let's just make sure that it's the best thing and the right thing to do. And then the third bit, there's just something in me that I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference for staff and for patients. And I think particularly staff, if you make a difference for staff, the NHS is the biggest employer in the country. They are your patients. If our own staff are telling us it's not a nice place to work, what do you think patients are going to say? It's not going to be any different. So if you can influence and make a change to staff and people that work for you, then they are absolutely going to change the fortunes and the experience of patients. I think if I was overarching as well, I'm an optimist. So I genuinely think, we read too much of the news because we hear about the bad things. And we do, as leaders, we have to focus on that because that's a way that we can learn and do better. We could do a lot better to learn from clinicians who do much more of that kind of open learning of where things have gone wrong. And, you sit and do your joint kind of investigations, don't you, on when there's serious incidents and things like that. And you do that kind of, so we could do a lot better at that and taking that approach from a clinical approach back into the real world. But I'm an optimist. There are probably at least, more than 70, 80% of people every single day, hundreds of thousands of people, millions every day walk out of our care settings. Really happy with their treatment. I think we are the best reactive care service in the world. I think we've got a lot of way to go on doing prevention and those other parts of it. But because we are leaning into the reactive nature of acute clinicians to try and do it rather than actually looking at problems a bit differently.
We always find with podcasts, you run out of time and you get
you want to keep going.
You want to keep going.
We need to do episode 2.
We do episode 2, locking you in here. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Nicci, conscious of what you were just saying there was, so as you're in your role now, with all that you've said, and you're so interested in all that you've been sharing with us, what's your sense now of where the NHS is, for want of a better expression, with that philosophy that you've just outlined there from your personal perspective? Are we making progress in the system, in the bureaucracy of NHS? Is there hope for optimism there more widely? How you read it?
So I think so. I think it's, as with huge organisations, actually getting that shift. I think what a lot of us are focusing on, what I'm focusing on particularly, are the things that you can make a difference in. Because there are some things that you're not going to be able to influence. The transition between NHSE and DH is huge. And you could waste a lot of time and energy getting wrapped up in that rather than focus on here are all the other things that we've got to do. That job needs to be done and people will engage me and involve me as it needs to be. But actually what I want to talk to people about is, why are you not looking at your cost base? Why are you not looking at your CHC? Why are your variants? I've still yet to find anyone that makes money out of outpatients. So why are we continually doing it the way that we're doing it? I'm not saying that we need to not do it. Well, maybe we do, because that's, I'd love people. My view of outpatients is, what if you were to design a world where outpatients aren't needed? What would that look like? And how would you, and that starts with a conversation with clinicians and other people. And I think I always get in trouble because I always say the NHS is brilliant at digitalising really poor pathways, rather than starting with digital as a solution.
And that's particularly important now. So what's your problem?
What you're going to digitalise, rather than going, what we're going to do is digitalise a pathway that we can currently do.
Absolutely.
So I do think there is. I think there is much move as we slim down the bureaucracy. It does therefore need people to stand up. So it needs people to take that ownership. It needs, whether it be trusts, whether it be regions, for them to go, actually, I want to be held accountable and I really want to do something different. I think we're starting to see it in the finances. We haven't got the game plan that we used to have of, it's all really hard, I'll make my deficit so big that I've got 10, 15% SIPs. That's not real.
That's not real.
But we need boards to also be much more about, I think it's a big turning point that we need to do with boards still. in taking that ownership of, well, how could I? What would that look like if we were to start to really shape and do things differently? I think the shift has started to happen nationally, but the quickest way for any of this to happen is always locally, for people to really take ownership. And why don't we have conversations with, if I was back working in a trust now, and someone said to me, the cost of your endoscopy service is, below national average, I'd be like, right, tell me someone that's a similar size, similar organisation. I'll go speak to them.
Absolutely.
I'll get my gastroenterologist. I'll get
to
go and chat to theirs, and we can look at it. And I think clinicians will do the same.
They would, because as you say, they're driven by peer performance in a big way.
And that's entirely achievable stuff. You mentioned that in terms of that trajectory, in terms of, it would be. I mean, it's already the 7th biggest workforce in the world, isn't it? I don't know what that would make it, a nation.
But if you think about how much we spend, so I'd say this to colleagues, and that most organisations would be on the FTSE 100.
And that's
guarantee
exactly right.
that on that FTSE 100, their chairs, their boards are talking about costs
and
the costs of their organisation, not about just keeping growing. Can we get paid more for it? But likewise, the NHS at 200 billion is more than, I think, something like 50% of the countries in the world's GDP.
Exactly.
So again, how are we looking at the total? Whether that be, I always get people to argue about growth or argue about ERF or margins, rather than going, actually, as an organisation, you're spending £4 billion. How are you using that £4 billion? We talk about mental health. Are we getting the best use of all of that hundreds of billions of money?
And there's a real school of thought now, isn't there, that that there's a way of looking at this as well, which is the NHS is not just a cost, it is a growth driver for the country, whether or not it's getting people back to work, the ultimate productivity challenge for the country, but also, locally, it's such a big employer. It's onward. All the companies that are onwardly part of it. Do you ever think that there's a role there for NHS finance that's different, that is about that kind of, what's that big picture growth driver for the country? I know it's a really big question.
So I think the NHS finance, but I think finance professions in general are probably going to see the biggest change in the next, I don't even think it's 5-10 years. I think it's 2-3 years with AI. And I think this is where we've got to move ourselves into being much more of your, hopefully you don't need to buy in economists. What we start to get is finance folk that can add the intelligence and be much more of that business partners, and start to bring people together, bring not just looking backwards, looking forwards, bring in growth projections, look at population health, work with those colleagues to do that. And I think that's the world where finance folk need to be, and a lot more on that QA, governance assurance. Because AI will generate something, or RPA will do something, but you need someone that can then interpret it in the right way. So we need a lot of people that aren't just kind of, someone told me, therefore I do. You need people that are going to really kind of look at the data and say, actually, this isn't quite right, and be brave enough to put their hand up. So I think it's a brave new world for finance staff, because they're going to have to do a lot more engagement.
It's fascinating.
Whether be that with technology or be that with people.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, isn't it? And I'm conscious we're out of time, really. You've already committed to a second podcast, okay? I think you did, didn't you? You already said you'd come back. You already said you'd come back. You blinked at the wrong moment. No, seriously. But conscious of that, I wanted to ask you what probably is one final question, because we've talked there massive picture, not even big picture, just about in your last response there. For a listener listening to us today here now who's working in healthcare in their own individual role, just listening into the podcast, from your perspective, what would be your advice to them about how they can make a difference for finance, for patient care in their own individual tiny role? We've all got a little tiny role. What can they do to help?
So I think everyone can make a difference if they really want to. There's two ways of doing it. One is you bang on the doors of the people that you think you can influence, and you annoy them enough, which I've done in a few careers, to say, I think that you can do something, and I think we can make this change. The other is, I think, getting support from people around you. How do you create? So even, like talk about that porter. That porter had an idea. What she went away was got a company to bring us a gift, a car, to show how it would happen. Not just say, I think this will happen. Actually, come and look at this. And she went to the patient group, went to PALMS basically, and said, have you got some patient groups that I can talk to? And one of the biggest complaints, actually, she then got Powell said, well, actually, our biggest complaint is about the walk from the car park.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So it's, for me, I think the key to a lot of this stuff is data.
Yeah.
Getting the right data, but I'm not expecting a porter to
sure.
have done what she did, but how do you have a conversation with someone that might be able to do that?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
finance can facilitate that if you find who your local finance person is. This is where everyone will prove me wrong and say no, but hopefully that's. But to me, it's the power of patient voice and the power of your voice. But as a single person, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
So you've got to find like-minded people or find a route to tapping in.
Yeah.
Because most people won't look a gift horse in the mouth. You know,
That's right.
They will go,
Absolutely.
well, you're solving me a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know I had a problem. I now know I have a problem.
You're
Yeah.
enthusiastic.
Once someone in my position has found out there's a problem, you can't unknow that. So part of it is going to people that have seen you enough and go, you've got a problem, and they go, well, actually, I can't ignore it now.
Yeah.
You've created a solution for, I always say to, no matter how, I used to annoy all of our apprentices and say, don't come to me with a problem, give me a solution.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear your problems, but what's your thoughts about it? And it irritates all my team.
Of
Because I'm
course.
like, well, I'm not solving it for you.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's the bit that I would say that they need to do. Define the problem, tell someone what the problem is, because once you're told, but then walk in with a ready-made solution. Here's what I've done,
What we
and
could
here's a
do.
load of people that supporting it.
Brilliant.
Absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
I'll tell you
It's been
what.
so brilliant.
So good. And you said you're an optimist, right? This podcast is definitely optimistic
It is.
about the future,
Yeah.
health and care. But listening to you, I'm like, it is in safe hands.
Yeah.
Genuinely, really, really. I know you don't want praise because that was your number 3, but
Absolutely.
really inspiring. Actually,
Yeah, thank you so much for
people
joining
are
us.
People are going to feel motivated from
They
that.
are.
Hopefully, listeners.
Yeah.
So
I hope so. I'm unbelievably proud to work for the NHS. There's a reason I'm here, and I've been in it for 15 years. And there's people that have worked in the NHS a lot longer.
course.
But so I'll finish with exactly what I said to a whole load of room full of finance CFOs. Is we're talking about pipeline and who's going to be the next CFO. And it's really, we're looking around and there's not many people put their hands up, and there's a lot more people wanting to be deputies or more junior staff and happy to stay there. And I said, well, who's going to do this job if you keep telling them how hard it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
These are privileged positions, and there's not a day that I don't wake up and think we're just such a privilege to be able to shape national policy, to be able to make changes on behalf of the NHS that might outlast me. But in any role in the NHS, particularly a leadership role, if we keep telling everyone how hard it is, and boards need to listen as well, then why is anyone going to do our roles? And why are patients going to... We're playing into that narrative rather than changing the narrative of...
We've all got a role
It
in
is
that.
difficult. I am not saying, so I don't want anyone to listen to this
But
and
it's
not
a
think about it.
privilege.
It really is difficult.
You can
We're in a really difficult time.
Yeah.
But it's difficult if you work in transport.
Absolutely.
It's difficult if you work in the private sector.
Yeah.
It's difficult if you work in manufacturing.
Yeah.
It's really blooming difficult. It's just the times that we're in. But our part of a leadership is to be able to give people a vision and a direction, and actually make people really feel valued and want to work for the NHS, and to say, okay, all of this might be really, really hard, but here's a few things that will find those 1 or 2 things that will make you feel really good about what you do and your career and working for the NHS. And you'll soon find that one little positive action then breeds that optimism, and maybe we'll get a room full of optimists working for the NHS.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you so much.
Perfect ending. Thank you.
You've ended it beautifully. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed that, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Connection. We hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights on the role that both technology and people play within the healthcare landscape. For more information and resources, visit RLDatix.com. Don't forget to subscribe to The Connection on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast platform you use. Join us next time as we continue to explore how healthcare is impacted by connecting people and technology. On behalf of the RLDatix team, thanks for listening.